Hello and welcome back to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with a guide on how to play Novgorod. So, Novgorod is a relatively difficult nation to play. It has one of the harder starts in the game, probably only beaten by the Byzantines. That's about it. They have one of the worst starts in the game, and they are going to die. 98% of the time, I would say. I have seen the AI survive, I think, once or twice, ever. Obviously, in a human player, that odd goes up a bit, but it also doesn't go up that much. So, as Novgorod, you start off as one of, well, I think you are the largest merchant republic in the game. It says that you're a vetch republic. You're not, you're a merchant republic. It's just the Russian unique name, sort of like how these are Russian principalities and there's the Tsardom. It's what merchant republics are called. You'll note that it's almost the same color as the other merchant republics, and that's because it pretty much is a merchant republic. There's only two of the game. The other is Muscovy, which is a vassal of Muscovy. Obviously, you have a slight problem, seeing as the nation that hates you the most, Muscovy, well, yeah, they hate you more than Denmark. Denmark's the other one that hates you. Is right on your border with the most disgusting amount of vassals a nation starts with. They have 5 of them, including Perm, which is actually a relatively high development vassal. But even their smallest vassal fields 3 to 4 units, which makes it relatively difficult to fend off Muscovy. Also doesn't help, Muscovy has a mission called Conquer Novgorod. Even on the new mission system, they have one. Yes, they do. And it pretty much gives them claims on Novgorod and tells you to try and stop them. So it's important to just see some numbers here on how lopsided this fight is. You start off with 13,000 total manpower and a force limit of 17. Okay. Muscovy starts off with a force limit of 31 and a total population of 24, not including their vassals, which all field 3 to 4 more units. So you are heavily outnumbered at Novgorod, and you don't have any military advantages other than you have cheaper mercenary maintenance. Doesn't sound good, but it's actually a rather good bonus for this part of the game. You have several things going for you as Novgorod. First off, you have money. To some degree. You have control of the Novgorod trade note, and you are going to be making almost 3 gold a month from that. You also have control of the White Sea trade note, but you're not going to be making anything from it. This is key because it allows you to field some mercenaries, which is your other strength. Mercenaries are very expensive. They cost money to maintain. They lower your army professionalism, but they are really your only hope of surviving as Novgorod. Mainly because of your very, 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 very shallow manpower pool for your size. It really should be larger in my opinion, but that's just after having to do this about 10 or 12 times till I actually survived long enough to actually be able to write a guide and then replicate it and then refine it into this. So the mercenaries are key. The other thing to note is you actually have some nicely placed forts here in Novgorod, which unlike most people, you actually have a fort in your capital, but also down here in Luki is another fort, which this has one advantage for you. You're going to lose all this land, but luckily it's all Arctic tundra, and so they'll be suffering a fair amount of attrition for conquering this land. Now, Lucky really prevents Muscovy and all its other vassals coming to the aid of Pskov. So as soon as the war with Pskov starts, you really want to wipe them out, try and take their capital fort, and fortify yourself there. The other thing to do as Novgorod is focus military power. You want to get a tech advantage if possible before the war starts or during the war. One-on-one, your army should be able to deal with any army that you come across. Muscovy is so large, they tend to split their army into 2 armies, which are smaller, and their vassals do not attach to them, which means their vassals are running around That's like a 3 to 5 stacks you can wipe if you're lucky. Plus, these forts mean if they come for you, you can simply retreat behind your forts to Neva or Ingermanland over here and then strike out while they're trying to siege one of your forts. You do have woods provinces in your forts, so your forts actually weaken their attackers, and since you own the fort, if you attack people sieging it, you get a bonus. The other thing to note as Novgorod is you really either need a discipline advisor or a morale advisor. If you take the morale advisor, you can definitely take on every army, any Muscovy army, one-on-one, assuming their other troops don't come to their aid. I'm not entirely sure about discipline. When I tested it, morale turned out to be a lot more useful. But then again, other things, you start out with a fleet, which I will recommend you either mothball or disband immediately. You might want to keep this other fleet here just mainly to gain more trade power if you're interested in, but you still lose money with it regardless. So you could honestly just disband your entire navy. You don't need it. Money is much better spent on advisors and more troops. You could probably also raise another infantry unit because you're going to want to go over your force limit because that's the only way you'll have a fighting Muscovy. One-on-one, you can actually win a war on Muscovy and their allies if you're really lucky. However, like really, really lucky, we're talking Skandenberg level luck. You're better off by approaching the only other countries in the area who will be allies with you. Pretty much every time I've tested it, the Danish hate you and Muscovy hate you. The Lavodan Order sometimes hates you. If they don't hate you, they can be a fairly good ally. They muster a fair amount of troops, and more importantly, they will take care of Pskov for you in a war with Muscovy. The big prize, if you can do it, is Poland down here. Now this is, Poland on its own won't cut it. You need Poland-Lithuania, which means from the beginning of the game, you need to get good relations with Poland. Prove relations. Sadly, you are not monarchy, so you cannot get a royal marriage with them, which makes getting the alliance a lot more difficult. If you're lucky, you can either get an alliance with Poland before they form the union with Lithuania, or you can get it with Poland and Lithuania afterwards. It's difficult. You don't want to form an alliance with the Teutons because they'll be destroyed, even if they tend to want an alliance with you, just because of, I don't know why the Teutons really want to give you an alliance, but they usually will be willing to give you an alliance. The other nations to look at are Odiev down here. You can ally yourself to. You can also invite them to a trade league if you don't want to waste an alliance slot on them. They will come to your aid versus Muscovy and they will get killed, but in the 1 year or so it'll take Muscovy, or half a year, to siege down their fort and defeat their army. You can either take Pskov or try and sneak the Muscovites' capital. The only way for you to win the war against Muscovy is really just take their capital. You won't be able to totally occupy all their lands. Muscovy is much too large, much too wealthy, and much too powerful for that at the beginning of the game. The other nation you can get an alliance with is Ryazan down here. You'll have to get an alliance because they're too big to be a trade league. Then you can also consider Theodoro. You have to improve relations, but as a trade league, again, they're another distraction for Muscovy. Circassia down here sometimes will do an alliance. They can also be a good distraction. Trebizond down here also sometimes will look for an alliance. If you can get like 2 to 4 nations in your trade league, that's good. Tver, by the way, is not a Muscovite vassal, nor is on your side. They almost always rival you. In terms of numbers, you're always going to be below Muscovy, but the key is to isolate, destroy Pskov if possible, which reduces them by 3,000 and gives you pretty good war score because you've occupied a castle. Then the next target really needs to be Muscovy's capital. If you can take Muscovy's capital and you own Pskov, you don't really need to own Pskov, but if you own Muscovy's capital and you fought a couple battles where you've beaten them and they've lost troops trying to siege all your northern provinces, you can usually force a peace. Now it's important to note this is one of other Muscovy's, Novgorod's advantages over Muscovy, is Muscovy currently holds 4 of your cores. They're pretty terrible provinces, an 8, 2 3s, and a 5. But that's still a swing of development, and more importantly, it weakens Muscovy and Perm. So if you can win the war, you can usually get these provinces given back to you relatively cheaply because they were formerly your core provinces. Before the war starts, if you can, it's to your advantage to try and form another claim if you can. I either find it best to fabricate a claim on either Muscovy's vassals up here, Belarus 0, this province here, which I'm not going to even attempt to say, or Ryzev down here, which is a pretty good province. You can usually, if you win the war, take a couple of those, and that puts you in a much better footing with Muscovy in a second war. Now, for another advantage of Novgorod, you are a republic, so you don't lose stability when your rulers die, which means you always have a general. This guy's 71, so he's going to die. But you can take them and almost get a general every time, so you get couple rerolls for generals. Obviously, you want a better shock and siege if possible. Maneuver is good. Fire is totally useless at this point of the game because you don't have any fire ability. Your infantry is literally all shock. So there's that. You don't want to mothball any of your forts before the war with Muscovy because it's going to happen rather quickly. You want to get your alliances up and running as fast as possible. If you get enough alliances, and I've done this twice testing this, you can actually have enough alliances and allies that Muscovy will not attack you. Instead, they will go after Kazan or the Great Horde. This is to your advantage because this is Sunni land. If Muscovy goes after this land, these provinces are going to be rebellious forever. The wonderful, -2 missionary strength that the Muslims have, which makes it very difficult to convert their land. And so unless Muscovy goes religious ideas or hires an inquisitor and a couple other things, they won't be able to convert the lands. So they have rebels popping up periodically in their lands. And if you strike, obviously, when they've been suppressing a rebel, you've got a chance. The other thing is, by taking this land, they'll tend to trigger coalitions. It sounds really crazy, but Kazan and the Great Horde tend to ally themselves to the Timurids. I've actually seen the Timurids get involved in a war in Russia within the first 5 years of the game. And at that point, Muscovy is really weak. If they do declare war on Kazan, you want to let the war go a couple months. Hopefully Kazan doesn't lose too terribly in the meantime, and then strike. Because Muscovy was in the war with Kazan first, usually I found they don't turn around and come after you. But they do prioritize human armies over AI armies, which means if you keep a strong army and keep darting in and out of forts or smashing armies, your allies, if you have them, will actually siege a lot of Muscovy's land. Another thing is Muscovy doesn't actually have any forts up here. Sounds really stupid, but they don't. They do have a fort down here, and obviously they have a fort in their capital and nearby in this province. You will have to occupy one of those forts to get them to make peace and give you provinces. Otherwise, they have the have occupied no forts in the area penalty, which is annoying. So really, as Novgorod, that is your key to surviving against Muscovy. Once you have survived against Muscovy, you're in great shape. If you've managed to retake a couple provinces from Muscovy, you're in great shape. If you've collapsed Muscovy, good for you. Before I forget, though, you're backed up against the wall. You're going to die unless you win the first war with Muscovy. So if you lose it, restart. But that doesn't mean you're free to debase your currency, take as many loans as you can afford, all of that, just to fight Muscovy. So you can keep fielding an army of mercenaries as much as you want and pretty much as many as you can afford to some degree for a while. The only thing that stops you is when your army is destroyed or your capital fort is occupied. So preventing Muscovy from taking your forts is rather key to the war while trying to take their capital. I found a lot of times their army will get lost up here and you can easily siege down their capital. Of course, they might have sieged down one of your forts in the meantime, so it's a cat and mouse game really with a much larger enemy, but it's quite possible to do. You're better off with that than trying to fight the Ottomans as the Byzantines on their own, or the Teuton versus Poland and Lithuania on their own, just because you're a larger nation. Once you survive, you've got lots going for you. Being a merchant republic, unfortunately, you can only have so many provinces in your empire, but you do have 3 merchants. They're not well placed at the beginning, so it might be worthwhile shifting the one from the White Sea to Novgorod to save you money. Over here, you don't really get that much money from trade anyhow in the White Sea, and in fact, you have a penalty in your capital due to collecting outside of your trade node. It's annoying. You also should embargo Muscovy and rival them immediately. Same thing with embargoing and rivaling Denmark as well. And any of your other allies, just to get that little bit more power projection, which can help you with morale and everything. Once you survive the war, going back to all this, you have the standard 3 government events for the Russians. Zubnik, Opcherina, and Streltsy, which are rather awesome. You also have the ability to form Russia at some point. You also can keep your old ideas, even though you've shifted to a czardom, which of course will give you a monarchy. But if you can avoid turning into a monarchy, that in some ways can be a good thing, even though the Russian government's absurdly powerful. The Novgorodian government's much stronger than the Muscovite government of the equivalent rank before they form Russia, mainly due to your ideas. So the flaw behind a republic is you have republican tradition, which you have to keep wasting if you want to elect your rulers. Well, Novgorod has an idea that gives you 0.5 republican tradition. It doesn't completely stop the republican tradition loss, but using the strength in government mechanic, the odds of your rulers being old and dying, all that, plus the 0.5 republican traditions, you can pretty much just keep re-electing good rulers, preferably young rulers that are under like 60, like 40, 30, 20 are your best ones. And so you have 666 rulers a lot, which overall will give you a larger monarch power pool than everyone else in the game by the end of it. Your other ideas, though, sadly, are a little bit lackluster. You get 1 prestige, 1 diplomatic reputation. You get some conversion strength, which is rather nice, but the only thing you'd be converting is Muslim land, which has a -2 penalty, and you'll have a 1 penalty, which means if you do want to convert it, you might have to go religious. Obviously, 0.5 Republican tradition. Then you get +1 merchant and 5% global trade power, obviously cementing you as a trade power. You get 20% manpower, which is rather nice. It allows you to actually field an army and fight. Unfortunately, it could be better. You don't have really any other military bonuses going with it. You get yearly naval tradition and privateer efficiency, which is kind of nice. You can privateer these trade nodes, and also your trading vessels will have more naval tradition, I guess. You also get cheaper light ships, so you can actually build lots of trade vessels, which is kind of cool if you want to try and dominate the Novgorod trade node. And then you get 20% fort defense, which is nice if you're massive in Russia, but obviously you have to get to that point first. Now, in terms of trading, you're at a pretty optimal point for trade in terms of having a relative choke point. Novgorod, if you control Muscovy's capital here, Moskva, or Moscow, you'll have a lot of the trade in the trade node, and you'll have fur and stuff, so these are valuable trade areas. The White Sea, you can also shift to the White Sea, which you will dominate because you control a lot of the trade there. However, you do have to contend with the Hanseatic Lübeck League over here, pulling all your trade out of the area. You also have to deal with Poland, and you have to deal with the Ottomans. However, if you get traders in the Crimea here, and you've got some of the trade nodes, you have obviously a lot of Kiev. If you fought Lithuania, even if you haven't, Lithuania, this node is not a really interesting node. You can avoid it by diverting trade through Astrakhan here to Kazan, which if you conquer, you'll own 100% of, which is awesome. And of course, there's other trade nodes as you go out here, Siberia. But the key point comes down here in Samarkand. You can divert a lot of India and the Far East trade all the way up through India to Samarkand. You can't get some of the southern Indian ones. But then you can steer that trade all the way to Novgorod. It's pretty amazing. There's in fact an achievement for the White Sea up here, which is I think control 90% of all trade in the White Sea trade node while making it the most valuable trade node in the world, which is really awesome if you can do that. You have to do it before colonialism hits, or you have to get large enough to pull tons of trade in. But it does mean you will get a lot of money from trade. If you go on, you definitely want to take trade ideas. Caravan power, particularly, and the trade steering will really help shift power to your land. Also, you can also get, if you don't form Russia, you can go expansion ideas and get encouragement of the merchant navy and other trade steering stuff, which is pretty awesome. Obviously, since you're a republic, you want to hit plutocratic ideas rather early on. It's pretty amazing. Morale, unrest, merchants, production, caravan power, and then just manpower recovery speed. But it's important to note plutocratic combined with, I believe it is economic. Yep. At the bottom there, second from the bottom. Formalized scales, weights, and measures. If you take that, once you have to complete both economic and plutocratic ideas, you can get another 0.2 Republican tradition per year along with 10% tax modifier, which the tax is so-so, but the 0.2% Republican tradition combined with your 0.5, combined with power projection, you can get quite a lot of Republican tradition pouring into your pool and keeping it nice and high. Obviously, you have to keep it above, I think it's 50% to prevent it from falling to a dictatorship. I tend to like to keep it above 70 just because once you hit 60, you start to get rebellions and other penalties, but 50 is really when things start to get bad. So for your first idea, plutocratic is actually one of the better ideas for you to take. I always argue for defensive just for the morale. Combine the two, you get 25% morale, which is really strong. Plus, defensive ideas are good on Russian nations for the fort defense. Also, the reduced land attrition is pretty nice, and their attrition for enemies also helps for long, drawn-out wars. You want to try and get trade ideas, probably your third or fourth idea. Until then, you don't have enough trade power, and you're concentrating on killing Muscovy and the Muslim hordes first. Religious ideas is good once you get past Muscovy. If you can get Deus Volts, you can pretty much conquer this whole area just through religious wars and convert it pretty easily. Only these guys in this area are really going to care. The rest of Europe doesn't. I don't recommend, as Novgorod, you try and invade the rest of Europe outside of maybe the Baltic states if they're weak. Poland, Lithuania, if you're allies, is a great bulwark against them. Obviously, if you can get it, the Ottomans are one of the most ideal alliances in the game. But it's rather difficult, but they don't hate you as much as they do Muscovy. So there is that on your side. Economic ideas, late game is good. Expansion and exploration, if you don't go turn into the Russian government, are a necessity to colonize some of Siberia. Exploration will be needed to explore, unless of course you turn into a monarchy and get Cossack explorers, which is the way past that. Administrative is really good because of the states. Russia has lots of them, more states, more land, etc. You will get a penalty if you go over a certain amount of states, I believe. I could be entirely wrong, though. It's a little bit confusing when one is dealing with merchant republics, specifically this other one. I don't know if it has the same exact penalty. Let me just double check. I don't think it actually really lists it, which is kind of annoying. Can't help you there. It might do that. I believe it functions as a merchant republic. So once you have a certain amount of states going over it, has penalties to like Republican tradition and stuff. It's rather annoying to deal with. Your rulers are pretty simple. You've got every 4 years 10 Republican tradition. You get one a year. You have the 0.5. That's 1.5 a year. You have 6. You'll lose 4 every election if you re-elect. 4-ish. There's obviously benefits to, power projection and everything. So, you don't have any unique missions currently. I suspect that'll change in the future. You have really no great events other than active uniformity and form the Russian nation. You have no estates, which is rather a penalty. Instead, you have the wonderful factions mechanic. Early on, fighting Muscovy, you wanted to leave it on the aristocrat. For the morale, 5% morale is kind of nice. The traders are nice if you're trying to do lots of trading, obviously. And the guilds if you're building stuff and producing stuff. I don't tend to use the guilds much. The aristocrats if you're at war, the traders if you're at peace, tend to be the best ways of generating both money and having a strong military at the same time. But 95% of Novgorod literally comes down to, can you kill Muscovy before they kill you? If you kill Muscovy and you take over Muscovy, you do exactly how Muscovy and Russia conquer the rest of the steppes and everything. Obviously, you'll be a little bit less into manpower and military than Muscovy, but you'll have more money. Since you have this nice little negative 15% mercenary maintenance, if you take innovative for the negative 15, administrative for the negative 15 mercenary maintenance, you can get like negative 45% mercenary maintenance, which is kind of cool. Important to remember though, mercenary maintenance is 145% above your base infantry. So it would still be 95% more expensive, but you have lots of trade, you don't have a lot of manpower, can be viable. Less viable as time goes on. Obviously, if you're going to do that, you don't want as much army professionalism, or you do, but it'll be more expensive to recruit them. And plus, they don't get the benefits from drilling, but you do, I believe, get the army professionalism benefits on them. Could be wrong. Also, in the Age of Reformation, there is mercenary discipline bonus, which you will want to snag. If you're in the if you have age mechanics. Obviously, you have issues with absolutism, but you can get most of the other penalties and stuff, the other bonuses and stuff. These Republic, though, actually, I don't know. Do you have a penalty to absolutism? It doesn't look like you actually have a penalty to absolutism as this Republic. I haven't actually played a full game with them lately, so some of my late game details is them is a little bit hairy. But overall, they're a really fun nation. They play very similar to Muscovy if you can survive them. Obviously, it's a lot harder to do so, but it's fun play as a republic that is definitely one of the great powers if you take over Muscovy's lands. So, pretty cool, pretty awesome. Survive Muscovy, use mercenaries to help do so, get alliances, siege their capital, force them out. Even if you take their capital, they're still going to have a larger army than you and could probably win the war if it went on longer. Thus, the initial peace that gets you a couple provinces is key. The longer the game goes on, the more being a human player will weigh in your favor. You'll make better decisions, better troops, better morale than Muscovy will. You can get better morale, disciplined troops than Muscovy can. But early on, you're pretty much stuck in the same circumstances as the AI. The only thing you can do is have more mercenaries, allies, and better advisors. So hopefully that will help you guys survive as Novgorod against Muscovy. It's very difficult. If you guys have any other tips, comments, questions, please leave them below in the comments. It's really hard. People need help with it. And if you enjoyed the video and you'd like to see others, check out all my other guide videos. I've done one on pretty much all the other major nations in the game, along with several achievements. And hit the notification button if you do subscribe so you get new videos. I do a new video pretty much every day, mostly Europa. And I hope to see you guys in another video. Bye for now.